Hi, I'm Reverend Joseph Boyd, and this is my reflection on our theme for April, liberation. The text of this will be available in the email, but you're welcome to listen along if you'd like. I think liberation is the perfect theme for April, because we are in a place of not knowing what is ahead of us. We are inundated by predictions, most of which are quite dire, and yet we are not certain what this month ahead will be like in its entirety. Liberation is the perfect theme for this month because we can only discover the fullness of liberation when we are constrained. This is an odd paradox. We can only discover the fullness, we can only discover how free our spirit and mind are when we are limited by outside circumstances. I am reminded of two figures who are shining examples of this fact: Nelson Mandela and Julian of Norwich. Nelson Mandela was released after decades of imprisonment and walked out with his humanity intact, with no trace of bitterness. How is this possible? He put his trust in his conviction, and he gave all his energy to them, even in confinement. He didn't leave any room for bitterness to enter. He poured his life into what he believed mattered most, even though he was deprived of his freedom in ways that you and I are not. In my time visiting with the incarcerated, I have seen this scenario play out. In the midst of a limiting, dehumanizing, and stressful constraint, a tightening of the physical space. Oddly, the soul has the courage to emerge. There is something about being human that defies even our most reasonable assessments that would naturally lead to despair and madness. There is some part of us that can emerge, often to our own surprise, when we feel trapped and feel we have hit a dead end. The second person, Julian of Norwich, was a famous anchorite mystic during the 14th century. An anchorite is someone who voluntarily lives in seclusion inside a small cell in order to open themselves up to spiritual revelation. This choice seemed a reasonable option as the Black Plague raged when Dame Julian of Norwich was only 6 years old. It is hypothesized that her family may have fallen ill, and that this was a way for her to quarantine herself to avoid infection. After living in her cell for quite some time, she became ill, and a priest was called to deliver last rites to her at the age of 30. As the priest came to deliver last rites, she had a series of visions which came to greatly influence Christian thought, called Revelations of Divine Love. There are many famous lines that she wrote in this revelation. She wrote about God's love being like a mother, maternal, embracing, not a patriarchal, distant figure. Her most famous line, which applies directly to our time, is "All will be well and shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." Her visions gave her a conviction that everything will be okay in the end. And if it is not okay, then it is not the end. This is the first time ever in recorded human history since the birth of Christianity that most Christians will celebrate Easter mostly virtually, not in the pews. In a month punctuated by rebirth and the promise of new life, we are in an important historical moment. Will we use this time to grow our soul and open our doors of perception to new revelation? Will we allow ourselves to more fully appreciate that this is the day we have been given, and it is waiting for us in glad expectation? Fortunately for us, we are not in the same predicament as Julian of Norwich or Nelson Mandela. We are in a period of temporary lockdown. It is an odd time, but it has the capacity to be beautiful if we approach this day with intention. Fortunately, we don't need to do this alone, and we shouldn't. We have a community that is active every day now via Zoom, and our fellow community members and I are here for you. We are here to welcome you with open arms and to remind you on a daily basis that this day is waiting for you, ready to embrace you with open arms. Keep in touch, and I look forward to seeing you via Zoom. May you know in this month liberation, the kind of liberation that can only be discovered in constraint.